Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to Spirit of Islam. I'm your host, Ashraf Zaghloul. And a while back we had a show about marriage, and I got a lot of response about, what do we do? And the biggest problem I hear, I get emails and I get phone calls about is, my daughter wants to marry a non-Muslim, what do I do? And I tell them, well, for the last 20 years, you kept your daughter locked up. You told her not to meet young Muslims. You forbid her from meeting young Muslim men at the masjid. You've allowed somebody to take your daughter and close her behind the curtain. And yet when she's home, she's watching TV. When she's at school, we tell the young Muslim boys at school, don't talk to your sister, Muslim sister. So she talks to non-Muslim, she falls in love with a non-Muslim, and she tells her parents, sorry, this is what I'm going to do. It's a big problem in the community because we've closed our eyes for the last 20 years, and now she wants to marry a non-Muslim. She fell in love, she's human, she has feelings, she fell in love with this non-Muslim. I'm not saying it's right. As we know in Islam, Islam says a Muslim could marry a Christian or a Jewish young lady, but a Muslim lady should marry a Muslim man, and that's where the conflict is. I'd like to introduce my guest today, Brother Mustafa Siddiqi. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Do you hear of this problem, Mustafa?
You do. You do hear of it, and you do come across it, and then the parents end up taking drastic action by shipping the child, if they can, off back to the home country.
And doesn't make it right either.
No, it doesn't make it right. But again, that's the whole thing. Putting kids into having an environment where they can sort of interact with each other without any issues is something that is, again, it's difficult for a lot of parents to understand. And again, back home it was different because the majority of people were always Muslim, whereas you come here, that's not the case. So those sort of aspects or those sort of thoughts on how they were handled, how their parents dealt with them, don't really translate very well over here.
Yeah, and the challenge is, as we mentioned before, in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, men and women were in the same place. Men were in the front rows, women were in the back rows, but there was that chance to meet each other. And I always tell people, maybe Islam deliberately did this. So a young man, while he's walking out of the masjid, he noticed this young lady, and he asked who she is, and he asked, maybe I can get to know her and marry her. But we've separated. You're not allowed to see your sister. You're not allowed to do. And so what do we do? It's a big problem.
It is an issue, but I think that there are groups that are. You have like the IMO meeting groups, and a lot of these have been born out of the fact that they haven't been allowed to meet. But I think
in a way, are we breaking the rules? If the rule is a man and woman should not meet, why am I having these meetings? These meetings say it should be allowed, and why don't I allow it in a normal, comfortable environment?
Well, I think one of the aspects, I think a lot of these sort of programs have developed because of this sort of situation, but the thing is, a lot of them are getting to some. I hear the main complaint I get, and what I've seen, well, not personally getting, but what I've heard is a lot of men and women who are getting on in years and they haven't found anyone to marry.
Yeah.
And they might be marrying somebody who isn't Muslim, but there are a lot of situations where they haven't found the right person to marry.
Because yes, there is young ladies who know they should only marry a Muslim man, and she doesn't have a chance to meet a Muslim man, so she's not getting married.
Right.
And still a problem. How do we get people together, young people together, in a halal environment? I'm not saying get them in a bad environment, but get things together.
Well, I think it has to be at more programs have to be sort of instituted at more masjids across Toronto or whatever city you're in, and sort of that seems like that have programs where people can meet and that's comfortable.
I object. Why is it a program? Why can't we go back to Islam where men and women were in the same place? We respect how it happened, but it is there, and give nature its way.
I think the reason is because it will take time. You can't institute something right away and say, well, you know what, this is what we want. You're going to find resistance. The best way to get everyone on board is to take those baby steps, but take, not baby steps as such, but concrete steps that lead towards that. But initially, to get to C, you have to go to B. So you have to go that route first. get them those programs set up, and then slowly you can move towards that. But initially, if you just try and do it and you run right through it, I don't find it to be as successful.
Yeah, but I always remember this story where a young lady came to ask Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam a question, and beside him was a young man, and they say she was an attractive lady, and this young man looked at her. This attractive lady is there. So what does Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam does? Gently take his face to look the other way, right? And the young man, being a young man, he looked back. And again, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam pushed his face the other way. What I'm trying to say is, he didn't tell her cover your face. And yet some of the people will tell you because it was Hajj time, so she doesn't have to cover her face. And he politely moved his face. But the nature that they can meet, and if he likes her, something will happen, and maybe he will ask to marry her. Why are we stopping this nature thing?
Well, I guess again it goes back to that cultural values. Then that's how it is. Some people have grown up with that, and they've brought that cultural values or systems, and they've implemented them here.
I feel implementing these culture things here is a crime, because he is pushing his young daughter to meet a non-Muslim and fall in love. I don't want that to happen, but nature is nature.
But the question is, who's going to take the lead on that? The parents themselves aren't going to do it because they don't know any better.
They better wake up, because they are facing these problems, and I'm here to tell them these problems are real problems that's happening. She's going to school, she's sitting beside somebody else, and the Muslim brother is told, don't sit beside her, don't talk to her. Nature is nature. We're humans.
I think there have to be certain limits and bounds, of course, but at the same time, you're right. You do have to be able to allow them to meet and sort of get together and develop bonds over the years and so forth. But the fact is, again, we have to see as to who you can approach, who you can talk to, who is willing to help the situation out. And most people aren't willing to do it out and take a lead on it simply because they believe that it's wrong, or they won't think the situation is as bad or as it's not a dire situation or an emergency situation.
Well, maybe it wasn't, but now it is. As there are more young Muslims born in the society, grow in this society, they're part of the society, that culture clash is becoming too strong. And we have to deal with it. It is becoming a serious problem.
The culture clash it's always been there, but yes, it is coming to a head to a point. But again, I have to reiterate, who do you go to? Again, the parents are going to wonder.
We go back to true Islam. We go back to true Islam and see what happened at the time of Prophet Muhammad and implement it. We have to. That's the only choice we have.
That's right, but the question is, who's willing to implement it, who's willing to take those concrete steps? And that's why I'm saying that if you are going to go down that way, then you have to start, at least we have to sort of foster the programs that have already started, help to encourage them, help to, volunteer, help in whatever way you can, because by doing that, you're helping to change the mold, helping to change the perception, because people are seeing that there is a drastic need. That you can't be limited to who you know and who your friends, your little friends group is. It doesn't work that way. It's not practical anymore. So to be more practical, you have to go back to how it was done before.
And I look and I say, we have not nourished in the masjid an environment for young ladies. The masjid is good for young men. There is classes, there is things. But most masjids don't have activities for young women, or they lock the young woman up, and then what happens? The young lady is either at home watching satellite TV and cable TV, or she's at the mall. And we're not opening an environment, a healthy environment, a halal environment, to be part of the community.
Well, that's the thing, but if they do that, if they are able to sort of give them a venue, like we said with these programs, and I think that would help out a great deal. But I think to get to that point where things are a lot more comfortable for either group, you have to help support these little programs that are going on. And if there isn't one at your area, you should help to start one up.
Yeah, and see, I don't want it to be an artificial program. I want it to be a real
organic
issue. Yeah, it really happens because this is nature. See, we say Islam is religion of nature, fitra. Islam, deen al-fitra, religion of nature. Let nature take its effect, right? You can't, Islam did not come to tell us, kill your urges, kill what you want. Islam came to control it and streamline it and give us rules that makes our life wonderful. Islam is so wonderful, not this hard thing we have to do.
And you're completely right, and that would be if people go back and they start reading those aspects of Islam and try and understand it better, I think it would help not only them and how to deal with this sort of important issue.
And I honestly think the best way is go, and I encourage people, go and read the Quran with an open mind and read and receive the words of Allah. Quran is Allah talking to you and telling us. The Quran is so nice, and yet sometimes some people, scholars tell people, you can't understand it, just read it for the blessing and the sawab and don't try to understand it.
That's one of the problems, is that people just read it without trying to understand it, without trying to understand the history behind it. If they do, not even a question of if they do, they have very limited resources, or again, they don't go to to books that have been vetted or have a sort of a solid Islamic pedigree to them.